Hello, and welcome to episode 60 of the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. I'm James Parisi here with my co-host Aidan Sarah, and hockey is fun again, ladies and gents. The off season isn't boring officially as of this past week. We have news, and more news to get to. But first things first, my wonderful co-host, how are you doing, fella?
I'm okay. I think it's pretty good that the NHL and kind of hockey in general really decided that they were going to start doing things and things were going to start happening. Because I always get a little bit hockeyed out, right? It happens. It's it's by both my own choosing and just my employment that I end up doing a lot of hockey related things during hockey season. So in the summer I like to detox, but like we're getting to the point where I'm getting excited again. I'm ready to get back into it. And that happened just as all these moves are made. So I'd say that's good timing, at least for me. And James, we've got like I'd say a good solid what you want to say like three or four things have happened in the last 2 weeks that could have pretty significant implications on teams in this league and like this is this is some serious stuff that we have to talk about here and it's exciting to finally be back into the like oh yeah no this is hockey this is what we live for here.
We do live for it, but there's one thing I live for that I want to talk about first since I started working again. Um, I want to talk about when that first song in the car after work just hits so nice. Today I didn't hit my monthly playlist because that's how I listen to music. Every song that I rediscover or discover goes into, say, the August 2024 playlist. And then at the end of the month, maybe a few carry over. But today I didn't click on the playlist. Today after work, I went all song library shuffle. First song, Reptilia by The Strokes. And then I was like, nah, 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 nah. It was so perfect. I put the sunroof open, sun shine through perfectly. Just as I'm hitting the intersection, the guitar riff comes in, and I went, all right, sick. This is a good day. This is a damn good day. So this begs the question, do you have a perfect after work in the car song for me to add to the list tomorrow?
James, like I don't want to be a buzzkill, but work for me is different in that like sometimes I'm off work and it's like 11:30 at night. So my answer to this question and your answer to this question might be very different. I totally know what you mean in terms of like songs for every scenario though. There's one called Good Morning Freedom and I don't know exactly who sings it, but it's on my liked songs. It was in Breaking Bad. It's the song that comes on if you've seen when Jesse picks Walt up at the airport in the RV. It's by Blue Mink and it kicks in like as they're driving away. And uh, that's a good like start the day song if I know I've got a long day ahead of me. Um, but not exactly the answer to your question, but that's as close as I can relate right now to it.
Well, since you were only able to give me a half effort answer, which I will take into consideration and I will try it out tomorrow. I would like our listeners to maybe we will throw a story up in a few days, and I want from our listeners their perfect after work, just got in the car, driving home in a good mood song. If they could toss all those in, maybe we'll review them on the pod. Maybe we'll put ourselves in their shoes. I think that's fun. Because, Aiden, I think we need more fan engagement.
Well, you know what, James, and I don't want to like just absolutely throw Spotify under the bus, but we were getting some pretty consistent uh questions submitted on Spotify, and then Spotify decided oh, like it just doesn't have that feature anymore to
Mm.
submit questions through Spotify. So that hurt a little bit, but yes, we will have more stuff for you. Like just ask us stuff, send us stuff, send us notes, send us anything. Adding to the songs, "Stay in the Light" by Honeymoon Suite. James, try that for the after work playlist.
Okay, roger that. Also, I had another situation where You know when you get a song stuck in your head that you haven't heard in years? I heard in my head, and I couldn't get it out of my head for hours. I got your picture, I'm coming with you, dear Maria, count me in. I haven't heard that song since probably 2021. And it was in my head for 2 hours earlier. And then I mentioned it to a coworker, and all of a sudden he's going, "Oh no." And then I realized I maybe have it stuck in his head. So I wonder if it's a disease that you pass on.
That happened to me with Love Fool by the Cardigans yesterday, actually.
Ooh,
I
okay,
hadn't,
that's a good track.
yeah, I hadn't heard that song like forever. I can't even remember, but I was just humming along to the chorus out of nowhere.
Well, enough about songs. It's time to get to some hockey because there is a lot, as we've said. Aiden, where do you want to start? Because there's a laundry list of topics for us to go through.
James, well, obviously, you and I both we're both massive World Junior fans. I'm a huge prospects guy. So we talk a lot about a player's potential. And man, I don't know if I remember a guy where I was more sure that they were going to score 50 goals than Patrick Laine when he was coming up. And for whatever reason, it hasn't happened for him. And those reasons, uh, plenty we know about, plenty we don't know about, but there's been a lot of them. He's had a very tumultuous career so far. But is this Montreal Canadiens move for Patrick Laine the reset button? Is this like the is this the jolt? Is this like the new environment with new teammates? Let's say it's aligned with even if it's aligned with Caulfield and Suzuki, and then Montreal can deploy Slaykovsky with Doc and Demidov or something. Like this Laine acquisition for Montreal, especially with this guy under contract for this year and next year, gives this forward core and gives Patrick Laine some pretty serious opportunities to make some noise and make some things happen.
Aiden, I really want to see Line A with Demidov. I really,
Yeah,
really want that to
yeah.
happen. I think the creativity on display would be just hilarious.
No, I kind of think it would be a lot like what Patrick Laine, how he excelled with Sebastian Aho at youth level in Finland.
Yeah.
Like very similar situations there. I think Demidov's more skilled than Aho, but they're both around the same caliber of playmaker. And that's a good shout, James.
Well, I will say, just to break down the trade, the Columbus Blue Jackets received Jordan Harris. In exchange, they sent Montreal a second round pick and Patrick Laine. A lot of people will be saying, how the hell did Montreal also get a second round pick when all they gave up is Jordan Harris? First things first, Laine's trade desires were very public. Second, there is, was it 8.3, 8.6?
8.7.
$8.7 million this coming season and the one after. Not a lot of teams can take that on. I don't really think there were that many suitors that could take him without retained salary. And I think that second round pick had to go over for Montreal to be able to take all that money. I think that just had to be it. I think Montreal had a little bit of leverage. I think both sides are going to come out happy, even though Columbus's blue line is kind of crowded, like really crowded. Um, I I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they traded the defenseman soon after receiving Jordan Harris. I like Jordan Harris. I think he's a solid player. I think like fully developed, he's probably a number four. That's kind of where he stands for me. But I think Line is actually going to work really well in Montreal with that young creative core, a lot of guys with good work ethics, and Marty St. Louis as head coach. I think that's the kind of guy who has played with people similar to Line A, who maybe need a different kind of treatment or that extra push. Maybe need the right situation for things to work. I think he's going to be down to experiment and make things work. Um, I think a 30 and 30 season for Line or a 35 and 25, I think that would be an incredible step to regaining his footing and having an awesome next 10 years of his career. That's what I want to see. Give or take 5 goals or assists either way. I think that would be ideal. What do you personally think about the trade? How do you think he's going to mesh?
No, I think this has definitely the potential to be an awesome fit. And I think what's important to remember about Patrick Laine is that like his game, what makes him click, what makes him good, what made him a superstar at the beginning of his career in Winnipeg was what he did in the offensive zone, and that was the ability to not only find space and then utilize what was an incredible shot, but even be a guy on the rush that was able to collect the puck in the neutral zone, drive his way in, open up space either for himself or for his teammates with his power and obviously the offensive ability he has. Well, you know what, James? Like the Patrick Laine, like eh, I didn't really see I, I didn't see as much regression on ice as I think there's a perception of. I think Patrick Laine's I think that the Patrick Laine variables here, like where he could succeed, where he could fail, is if he's forced to miss more time. Because this guy hasn't played 82 games in a season since 2018-19. Granted, he only missed 3 games that next year, and then there were COVID shortened seasons. But between a stint in the player assistance program and multiple injuries, it's been years since he's had a full season, and his last 82 game season didn't go well, but the one before he scored 44 goals. And yeah, I know we're taken way back. 44 goals was 2017-18 for Patrick Laine, but I really think it's important to remember that like Montreal just got this player who has had COVID year, COVID year that he was traded to the Blue Jackets, COVID year in Columbus in which he was point per game, injury riddled season in Columbus in which he had 52 points in 55 games, and then season where he was for the most part in the player assistance program. That's been Patrick Laine since 2018-19. Like, who knows what's going to happen with this guy if he plays 80 games, is healthy, and plays in the top six, and is in a positive enough mental state to perform on the ice. Like, I I really think that for Montreal, we could see a return to at least the Patrick Laine we thought we were going to get. Is he going to score 40? I don't know, but it's not out of the question.
Well, Aiden, I think it's worth noting as well that Liney's numbers when he's been in and out of the lineup haven't been that bad. You look at his numbers over the last 100 games, they are better than probably 85% of NHL players. And that's kind of impressive. Yes, I'm pulling that number out of nowhere. Yes, often when I make up stats, I use 85% and 15%. That is legit. But Liney's numbers have been great. Like anyone thinking that this guy can't play, dead wrong. Dead wrong. Yeah, I think we can move on from there and just leave it on the note that I hope he excels and it's gonna be damn fun to watch either way. Because even if he doesn't excel, he's gonna try and make some cool plays. So first few games that Montreal plays this season, mark those on your calendar. It's probably gonna be must-watch hockey. Not even just him, but with the rest of their talent on display as well. Moving on though, Edmonton. Just after our last podcast episode, things got a little dicey. Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway both signed offer sheets presented by the St. Louis Blues, and the Oilers were up against it. Didn't really seem like they had much they could do. The idea that they could maybe get Evander Kane on IR for the whole long-term IR for the whole season or move out of contract was floated, but you know, even then there were a lot of conditions that had to be met, and they would have been stuck frozen against the cap. What the Blues did was get both of them at numbers the Oilers wouldn't be able to touch. The theory is probably about double their value. Um, like I don't really think the Oilers had a chance. They made a couple moves in response, trading away Cody Ceci, and getting Ty Emberson from the Sharks in return, and then getting Vasily Podkolzin from Vancouver in exchange for, I believe, a fourth round pick. Yeah, so they have kind of filled spots with maybe not the same level of players within their system, but guys who could potentially grow on the roster, adjust to their system, get a little bit better, fill in the hole, next man up kind of mentality. But um, Aiden, everyone who listens to this podcast has followed these stories. Aside from what I've said, They all know what's happened. But the fun part, Aiden, this was offer sheet chaos. This is what we want. How long have you been waiting for a GM to just go, screw him? We're signing his boys to offer sheets.
I can't even tell you like the how much I want this to result in this happening again every year moving forward. This is a tool at general manager's disposal that never gets used and should. And at the end of the day, like it was a risk from everybody involved. I actually, if you ask me seriously, James, Dylan Holloway is from Alberta. He's 22 years old. He has just signed a 2-year deal with the St. Louis Blues. Uh, do you think Dylan Holloway expected this to be matched by Edmonton? That's the first thing that I can't get past in my head is it makes sense from everybody's perspective except for Holloway, honestly. Because to me, Holloway, like it was maybe 700, $800,000 more than he could have got from Edmonton. It was about $1 million more than I believe their last like offer was to him. But if you're a Holloway, you're leaving this Oilers team for a St. Louis team that are still on the way down, James. I don't think St. Louis have started their swing back up yet. Like, uh, it makes sense for Broberg because you're not getting anywhere near 4.5 million bucks. It makes sense for the Oilers to, quite frankly, let both of these guys go. It makes sense for St. Louis to take the risk on the high AAVs. The only piece of this puzzle that doesn't make sense to me is why Dylan Holloway signed it. What do you think?
If you're Holloway and you're looking at the Oilers and your agent is looking at the Oilers' next couple years of contracts, that agent is seeing Edmonton have to sign McDavid and Draisaitl and Evan Bouchard in the next couple years and going, if my client gets better, we're just going to have to do this again in a couple years. So let's rip the Band-Aid off now. Let's go to St. Louis. Let's get more ice time. Let's see what we can do. So I think Holloway, given what you've explained, may have been a little downtrodden, a little heartbroken, probably dreamt of being an Oiler for his whole career. But after talking with family, friends, and I'm just speculating here, his agent, maybe his new teammates, he's probably thinking, you know what? This might be the spot for me. I could really show the NHL what I've got. I think it's a better situation for both players. And another thing that's been well documented online, the Oilers have a new GM. These aren't Stan Bowman's guys that he drafted. Do you think he has any attachment to them? Or do you think he's going, second round pick, third round pick? These are assets that I can flip when we go for our playoff run this spring. I'll fill in the blanks. He's two of the best players in the world and a guy who's going to be top 4 or 5 in points among defensemen. I don't really think he's that worried. I think he's just thinking we can get the job done without them, maybe.
Well, and not to mention, he picked up two guys that I'm a pretty big fan of. I absolutely think Chris Knobloch is the type of guy to get the best out of Vasily Podkolzin. And Ty Emberson is just value, so much value in that trade, James. Like to trade CC and only have to give up a third to get San Jose to take these 2 years, or sorry, the 1 year left on Cody Cece's contract pays him $3.25 million. But Emberson, like, this is a guy that if you told me that they got him to play on the second pair with Darnell Nurse, I would say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Is it the best second pair in the league? Of course it's not. Of course it's not even close. But guess what? This type of defenseman is exactly the type that Nurse needs. He needs a right-hand shot, stay at home, low risk, low reward, just do your job player.
A
And
platoon guy.
yeah, and so if you're looking at the departure of Broberg and the acquisition of Emberson for Edmonton, yeah, absolutely. Broberg's the better player. He has more offensive capability. He's got way more promise. But at the end of the day, Edmonton's win now, and the team that they have, Emberson has a potential to be more useful than Broberg would have been. He definitely fits better with that top four. If you look at Ekholm, Bouchard, Nurse, it makes more sense that you would play Emberson with a Darnell Nurse that at the end of the day, like he for what you're paying him, you need him to be better than he's been. So giving him the exact archetype of partner I think he needs to succeed is smart.
Well, Aiden, I think everyone involved in this sequence of trades, whether it's the new guys in Edmonton or the guys leaving Edmonton, I think they're all going to good scenarios. I think amid all this chaos, a lot of players are going to be given opportunity to really, really show what they have and an opportunity to grow. And I think that's fun. But we are still not at my favorite part of what happened in this sequence of events. So a lot of people are speculating that the Blues and general manager Doug Armstrong were either targeting the Oilers or targeting their new general manager Stan Bowman. So Doug Armstrong has a media availability. He gets asked the question, and he goes, "If my mother were the GM of the Oilers, I would have offer sheeted these guys." How awesome is that? Give him more runtime. Let's interview him more. Doug Armstrong, I'm charging you to cause more chaos. And media folk in St. Louis, give him all the runway. Let's have fun with this, because I like it a lot. Aiden, if you were a GM right now, there's a handful of RFAs out there, and you have the assets. Let's say you're a middle of the pack team. Would you do it?
100%.
Like, say Lucas Raymond, Mo Sider, Jeremy Swayman. I'm not sure who else is left. Um, which of them are you offer sheeting, and are you worried about the draft picks, or are you just taking the player and running with it?
Thinking of all those guys you just said, like those are the big three, right?
Yeah,
And Seth Jarvis is number 4.
right.
Thomas Harley and Cole Perfetti, I think, are still unsigned. Like, there's a group of players where, if you ask me, losing like the first, second, and third round pick set of compensation would be worth it. And I think it's all those players. And the last time I remember the high reading about this, and I don't have that information in front of me right now, I believe it was like right around $8.5 million was the max for it to be a first, second, and third round pick. I would offer sheet any of those players to between $8 and $8.5 million contracts if I had the money. And I'd give up a first, second, and third round pick for any of those guys right now, based on the age they are and the potential they all have. And obviously, if you ask me in terms of if I was building a team from scratch, I'd probably take Cider ahead of any of the other ones, but it would have to be contextual team to team.
Aiden, 9.16 million is the most for the first, second, and third round picks. Once you get from 9.16 to 11.45, it's two firsts, a second, and a third. And then over 11.45, it's your next four first round picks.
None of those guys are in above 9-1 right now. The only guy that
Cider?
yeah, the only guy that you can make even a remote argument is Cider, but
And I would offer Cider 11.45 right now. And get the two first, a second, and a third. Like, say you're okay, let's say you are okay, Philadelphia. Wouldn't you do it?
yeah,
Like, because Philly's good enough that they are probably going to pick between 8 and 15, you would imagine. I'm okay with getting rid of two guys that I'm going to draft between 8 and 15, and then a second and oh, yeah, and then a second and third. That's fine. In exchange for Mo Sider, that is a top pair D man for the next 8 years. 8 years, 11.45, get it cooking. Done. If I'm Philly, I'm all over it. Why the hell not, right?
yeah, no, for sure. And not to mention, like, you have guys too that the other thing that I totally think it would make sense to see, like, if you're a team anywhere, why aren't you going to the Winnipeg Jets and saying, "Hey, what do you want off my roster for Cole Perfetti?" Because you can either basically say, "Okay, um, please, let's make a deal for Perfetti." And then if Winnipeg's not receptive, if it doesn't work out, then you offer sheet them. Winnipeg is win now, which means they would entertain a deal for an older player in exchange for Perfetti. And they would much rather take that than the draft picks they'd receive as compensation because they're in win now. So I not only think that like, the offer sheet factor is the only thing to consider here. I think that if the threat of offer sheets becomes more real, what would you do if you're the Winnipeg Jets and a team comes up to you and they say, "Here, you can have two of our rostered players in their mid to late 20s or early 30s to help you in exchange for Perfetti, or we're going to offer sheet him to this much and you'll get a first and a third round pick and that's it," right? Like, and obviously in the latter scenario, Perfetti would have to agree to the offer sheet, which is the wild card in that whole situation. But Winnipeg's also up against the cap. So you basically are like, here, gun to your head. You either can pick a couple players so we can make a trade that you like, or you're gonna get these two assets because I'm gonna take the player from you. And I know that's kind of just an expansion on this thing that, we want the offer sheet thing introduced, and now I'm the one that's, saying, "Oh, but also we can see this happen more." But to me, it's logical progression, and I I I totally think that in a league in which the hard salary cap handcuffs teams more times than not, using creative tools like this is how you get ahead.
Aiden, I have one more offer sheet piece of randomness for you, a scenario. If you are the Minnesota Wild and you look at the RFAs available and you look at offer sheet compensation, do you not go to Seth Jarvis, offer him 9.16, well, just under it, so maybe 9.15, uh, and bring him to Minnesota in exchange for Carolina getting a first, a second, and a third for Seth
100%.
Jarvis any day of the
100%.
week?
100%. Well, and it's worth mentioning too that if you're dealing with a team like Carolina, much in
Who
the
only
same
has
way,
6.5 million in cap space.
yes, 6.5 this year, but I'd even look ahead to to the future as well. Because the thing is, like, if I'm signing Seth Jarvis for 9.1, I'm probably only giving him a 2 or 3 year contract, right? Like, you don't want to be paying Jarvis that much long term. If you're gonna sign somebody to a long term contract, the point is to do what Matty Beniers just did, and we'll get to Beniers, but it's the trend that we've talked about over and over again of the players fresh out of their ELC second contract going long term, too much money for them right now, but if they fulfill their potential, it'll be a steal. Think Jack Hughes signed an 8x8 before he'd done a thing in the league, and then he scored 100 points and he made it look super worth it.
Almost
Um,
100.
yeah. So if you're looking at the Carolina Hurricanes right now, who, yeah, like you said, are currently sitting with a pretty decent little pile of cap space, which they are reserving for Jarvis, clearly. But you look at who they have to sign next year, they still have defense problems that I think they need to work out for next season. Like we talked about Alexander Nikishin and the possibility that he's going to get here at the end of the season, but they lost Brett Pesci, they lost Brady Shea, and next year they have Brent Burns and Dmitry Orlov as UFAs. So if you look at that, you might want to sign Jarvis. You might want to say, okay, well, let's give him a 2 year deal or a 3 year deal, because then that would make Carolina even more hesitant to match. And I know like we're getting into the minutia of hypothetical situations here, but this is all to say that the strategy and the how effective these kinds of moves can be. eh, We're not overstating it. And I think that's kind of why I think we're stuck on it, right? And we want to see more of it is because it's just like an added layer to management and to this competitive process.
100%. And I mean, it's it's a lot of fun watching all of this run down, and I'm really hopeful that in the future you can listen to Aiden and I yammer about RFAs and offer sheets and everything that comes hand in hand with that. But we can't make the whole pot about offer sheets. We're already pretty deep in here, and I don't even think we're halfway through everything we need to talk about. So let's get this cooking. Pittsburgh has been busy. Let's start hot with the most recent one. Today we are recording this. It is Thursday, August 22nd. And earlier today, on this day, Pittsburgh made some fun happen. They traded Braden Yeager to the Jets for Rutger McGroarty, who had, I believe, asked for a trade or said he wasn't signing in Winnipeg. One of the two, they both mean the same thing. And basically, they swapped a very solid prospect in Yeager for a better prospect who has lower value because of the trade request in Rutger McGroarty. I think Rutger McGroarty is a surefire second line forward, maybe a first liner if he gets there. A lot of people are already pegging him to play in Pittsburgh's top six this coming year. I think it would be a lot of fun if he does. Well, when he signs. But yeah, Aiden, banger of a trade in my eyes. This is something you love to see. This is a hockey trade. This is two prospects flipped, and this is a hell of a lot of fun. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, there's going to end up likely being a winner and a loser to this trade. But right now, this is super win-win. Like Winnipeg, it's been, we've talked about it on this podcast and it's been documented. Rutger McGroarty said no to Winnipeg, and Rutger McGroarty said, if you do not say I have a roster spot next year guaranteed, I'm not going to play for you. To everybody. So I totally think that your prophecy that he's going to play in the top six in Pittsburgh is going to come true, not just because if you look at the Pittsburgh Penguins and you look at McGroarty as a player right now, there's a fit there for him, but because I don't think he would have gone to Pittsburgh if there wasn't. Like that, this is why he's there. And this is a guy who, like he probably shouldn't have been back at Michigan last year, and his stats would tell you that. 52 points in 36 games. He had an assist per game, and him and Gavin Brindley just absolutely tore the NCAA to shreds. Gavin Brindley, by the way, who has already signed his ELC and I believe will be kind of that one of those sneaky Calder Trophy candidates this year. Not that I think he's going to come close to the guys at the top because Matvey Michkov is Matvey Michkov, but he could easily sneak into there. But you've got McGroarty and for Pittsburgh, it's just it's all of a sudden I think kind of a cool little situation that you could have Sidney Crosby's Pittsburgh career come to an end playing alongside maybe the guy that kind of takes the mantle as a superstar forward. And I think I think it's a good move by Dubas to get him in there and to get him integrated at this point in time. Braden Yeager, however, on the other side of it, was not going to be in there for Pittsburgh, and that's kind of why I'm talking about Dubas getting a player that he can slot into an effective role right away. Because even if you're gonna, even if you're gonna say that Braden Yeager is going to be at the same or potentially better than Rutger McGroarty in terms of their long-term futures and the futures they have as hockey players, um, Yeager wasn't going to play now. So this makes a ton of sense for Pittsburgh. And on the other side, Winnipeg getting somebody who could easily turn in to a long-term Winnipeg Jet, a long-term middle six centerman. That's awesome too. He does have first line potential, Yeager. I see him more as a second line center. You're kind of, the it's hard to find the comparison for him. He's a pretty unique player in that he's very good at everything without being great at any one thing. But for Winnipeg, who have had Mark Scheifele forever, there's going to eventually need to be a new young up and coming center. And Scheifele's got the long contract, so it's not like Scheifele's going to leave, but just another guy to take some of those offensive minutes.
Definitely. And I really, really would like to give credit where credit is due to Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins management team. They did not have a lot of draft capital. They had missed the playoffs a couple times in a row. Their prospect pool was fairly thin. And aside from that Rucker McGroarty move, earlier this summer, they took on a second round pick from the St. Louis Blues to take Kevin Hayes. And There were a couple other picks moved in that deal, but when the Blues needed their second round pick so they could compensate the Oilers to submit that offer sheet, um, the Penguins traded them their pick back and a fifth rounder as well for a second and a third. So they upgrade that fifth rounder to a third. There's some draft pick farming. All right, the business doesn't stop there. Nashville needs to clear some room, move a contract. They trade Cody Glass, a third round pick, and a sixth round pick to the Penguins just for taking Cody Glass. They got those draft picks. In exchange, Pittsburgh sends over Jordan Frasca, most likely a career minor leaguer, hopefully more, but not really a player of value. And all of a sudden, the Penguins' depleted draft pick cupboard is actually looking pretty good. This year they don't have a second rounder, but they have two fifths and they have a pick in every other round. In 2026, they have a first, two seconds, two thirds, and two sevenths. And they're missing a fifth. You go a year later, they have an extra fourth and an extra second that they got in exchange for Riley Smith, another savvy move they made earlier. So, Aiden, I know for a long time you've been saying the Penguins need to just ship some guys out and get some draft picks. Well, they've shipped some guys out. They've got some prospects. They've got some good draft picks. Are you ready to give the Penguins their flowers?
Yeah, no, I for sure. Because if you take a step back, you look at this Pittsburgh team, and you look at who's already in the system, um, who their top prospects are, who their best players are right now, the contracts everybody's at, the age everybody is. Like, I think this team is the right 5 years away from competing again, not just as a playoff team, but as a competitive playoff team. And I think that this season started the clock. I think they finally hit start because I kind of think that was the outlook of this team. And it's been for the last 3 seasons that they probably should have hit that reset button and probably could have started that 5 year process. But, it's an expression, it's a cliche for a reason. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The second best time to plant a tree is right now, right? Because if you don't do it, it's never going to happen. And for the Pittsburgh Penguins, you look, Sidney Crosby's at the last year of his contract making just over $8.5 million a season. Whether or not they choose to extend him, you look down the lineup, like the 4 years to Brian Rust and Ricard Raquel are kind of tough. Carlson's got three, Letang's got four, Graves has got five. But for the most part, like Michael Bunting, 2 years and he's done. Kevin Hayes, 2 years and he's done. Evgeny Malkin, 2 years and he's done. Nola Chari, like so much of this team is going to be moved out, and again, provided that the Penguins, keep selling it and keep building this team to to not compete right now and hopefully compete in the future, the better those young players are going to get because Pittsburgh are going to have more draft picks and have higher draft picks, right? Like it's this process that they finally begun, I think. And it's at the end of the day, it's probably going to suck to be a Penguins fan for the next 4 or 5 years because there's not going to be too much to watch that you really are going to be too excited about. Maybe it's going to be Rutger McGroarty. You're probably going to see a very, very heartfelt farewell to at least two, if not more, of these franchise cornerstones in the next couple seasons. But the team's not going to be good. That's what you need to do. You need to be bad for a few years. All of a sudden, if they end up with Landon Dupont, nobody's going to be complaining anymore.
Totally. And I think at this year's coming trade deadline, which feels so far in the future, but I love talking about it because I love chaos. Um, you're going to see the Penguins ship out some of the following players: Matt Nieto, Drew O'Connor, Anthony Beauvillier, Lars Eller, maybe even Cody Glass again, Marcus Pettersson, Matt Grzelcyk, Ryan Shea. Like all of those guys are pending UFAs for next summer. And I think there's probably a good couple second, third, fourth, fifth round picks in there that they can add to their cupboard and load themselves up at a draft in the future or several drafts in the future. And then you even think like they picked up guys like Blake Lizotte for 2 years, Sebastian Aho, the defenseman, for 2 years. You pick up those guys knowing that they are going to have an increased role at some point. At some point, they're going to have to play a little bit more minutes, and maybe their value is going to go up. Maybe the trade deadline after this one, someone's going to go, huh, this guy plays well in an elevated role. I've got a hole on my second D pair, on my second or third line. This guy seems like he can play an elevated role. Let's do this. They have Michael Bunting for that. They got Kevin Hayes for that. Like it, if you are a hockey nerd who loves seeing your team make moves that can potentially better themselves, I don't think this is going to be that dark of a time for the Penguins, for Penguins fans rather. I think if they look at it the right way, they can have a lot of fun with this. And again, it starts today with acquiring Rucker McGroarty and then the Penguins signing him immediately to a 3-year entry level deal. He's going to be making 1.45. No, he's making 950K per year, but it's 1.45 against the cap just because there's some performance bonuses. But and a signing bonus rather. But moving on after us glazing Pittsburgh for that long, which you know what, it was due. We have not been friends of the Penguins on this podcast, and it was due time. But moving on, a massive contract, and hopefully it's not our last one of the summer. But Matty Beniers, 7 years, $50 million. What is Seattle doing with this deal? Tell me about it. I like it.
Yeah, I think they're getting their second line center done at a solid number for the next 8 seasons. I think that's what they've gone and done here. Matty Beniers has shown a lot over his 167 NHL games already. And to surmise what I think I've seen out of him, I think is just that. I think this is going to be a very effective top six center who's responsible on both sides of the puck, can get you a goal when you need it, and can fill any role you ask him to fill. And near 60 points in his rookie season, dropped down to 37 last year in the sophomore slump. But Seattle had a much tougher year last season than the one before. I, you know, I thought Beniers looked a little bit uninspired last year, which could have easily come from the way the Kraken dropped off. So I'm super interested to see how the first 2 years of this contract go. But overall, again, the salary cap is supposed to go up. That, hasn't happened yet. But if that is the case and it does go up, this contract's going to look even better because you're going to see, $7 million in 4 or 5 years maybe look like a lot lower of a number in terms of where player salaries are going to be with a cap increase.
And if he can be what he was in his first season, even just that, not even anything any better or that much better, I wouldn't even be mad at about $7 million. That's probably the going rate for second line centers moving forward. I think so at least. But yeah, I mean, it's solid business. You get a happy player who knows you're committed to him after a tough season, and you get maybe young guys in the Kraken organization going, all right, if I can show them what I've got, I can get paid too. If I can show them what I can be, what I am right now, I can get paid. This is a team that's ready to invest in its future, and I want to be part of that future. And I think that's a pretty cool thing to see. Aiden, do you see Beniers having a really solid bounce back? I personally do, just because of the addition of Chandler Stevenson to help on the defensive end, and then Shane Wright maybe easing some of the offensive pressure.
Maybe again, the hesitancy I actually have is in Seattle, not necessarily in Beniers himself. I think he'll be better no matter what. But in terms of maybe reaching the 60-point plateau that he was close to, I'm not sure because this is a weird team, right? It is. Like Seattle is odd in that you've got like a complete mix of players and it's the kind of team where honestly, James, like we the first 2 seasons of the Seattle Kraken, I feel like are the two ends of the spectrum this team could be. I truly think they could be a playoff team that could, be pesky and win a round. Or I totally think they could be just, that ninth to 12th in the conference, almost there, but not really almost there. And I think it depends on so many of these players. You look at a guy like Jaden Schwartz. Schwartz could have anywhere between 30 and 60 points, right? Same thing with Stevenson. Same thing with Burakovsky. Same thing with Tolvanen. Same thing with Bjorkstrand. Like, there are just so many players in this team that if they perform at their best, at their most productive, like, could elevate this Kraken team. Or you could have a lot of struggles, a lot of guys showing their age as everybody gets a year older on this team. At the end of the day, Jaden Schwartz and Jordan Eberle and Yanni Gord all have their best years behind them. And you can likely say the same for a few more players on this team. Jamie Alexiak, maybe, right? Adam Larson, maybe, who's a pending UFA. It's a lot of question marks with the Seattle team. And I think as goes the Kraken will go Beniers for the most part.
Aiden, I'm going to give you three players and an over under on points. Brandon Montour over or under 54.5 this year.
I think under. I'm a less that's less to do with Montour and more to do with Dunn. I just think that, at the end of the day, if there's one defenseman on the ice because they need a goal, it's Dunn. It's not Montour. So that's where that comes from for me. It's not, yeah. I think it'll be around there, but I'd lean under.
Matty Beniers over or under 52.5.
Again, pretty bang on where I'd have him. I'd like to optimistically say over for him. Again, just I think I think he will be the focus of that forward core. I do think the Stevenson acquisition was to soften maybe some matchups on him, and I think with that it'll help him a bit.
Shane Wright over or under 47.5.
Under for sure. There's just not the top 6 minutes. There's not the power play minutes for him. And again, Detroit did it a few years ago, and it was confusing me. But there's a tendency for teams, and I don't really get it. But a lot of teams, Columbus did it last year as well, or 2 years ago, or over the last couple seasons. The Jackets now, if you kind of include Jordan Harris in this conversation, where like young guys who are ready to make steps into roles for whatever reason, like are having these roadblocks put in front of them. David Juracek should be a full-time NHLer right now. Simon Edvinsson should be a full-time NHLer right now. And the acquisition of Chandler Stevenson, as much as it's probably Ron Francis trying to keep this Kraken team as competitive as he can in the short term, I think has completely put another roadblock in front of Shane Wright in terms of his elevation into the top six, because Yanni Gord could have easily been the third line center, right? I don't think Stevenson and Gord end up 3C, 4C, which means at best Wright's the third line center and he'd have to pass Gord. It doesn't make sense to me. And it kind of sucks because if I'm being quite honest, Shane Wright, I think, is completely ready for a top nine role in the NHL. But I don't think he's going to have the opportunity to do that.
That's unfortunate. I think in the right situation, Shane Wright is a Calder candidate this year.
I'd agree. I just don't think he's in it in terms of best spot for him to succeed.
You know what? I looking at this, I kind of hope they trade Yanni Gord. I just hope so. I like you need to give a guy some runway. Also, it's worth noting that Chandler Stevenson can play and excel at the wing. So that's worth noting as well. I expect to see a lot of different line combinations in Seattle this year, especially in the first 20, 30 games. But moving on out of Seattle, one thing you love to see, Jakub Vrana, PTO in Washington. This guy's had a hard couple years, and at times he has shown flashes of brilliance in his career all over the map. He's a guy I've in the past been very excited to see get the puck on his stick, very excited to see blazing up the ice. And I think with a Caps team that has a lot of fun optimism and a lot of different combinations, I think a couple preseason games, a couple good scrimmages in camp, meshing with the right players, and he could find himself in a top six role excelling again. So I'm really hoping that one works out.
Yeah, I'd agree. Again, like it's not easy to be the guy and to be the person that says you need help, right? And it's brave, and the process of getting better is a tough one. And I think Verana, having gone through that, deserves another shot here. And I think he'll succeed in Washington. It's where he was at his best, I think, save for like the half season in Detroit after he got traded.
Definitely. And no one can say he lacks the talent. He has that oozing out of him. So let's wish him all the best there. Another transaction today. Cole Sillinger in Columbus signs a 2-year, 2.25 per. Safe to say, probably third line center.
Yeah, well, this is a show me what you got, really, right?
Yeah.
Like it's gonna start as the 3C, no doubt. And I kind of think this 2-year contract isn't a coincidence in terms of it's gonna be when this expires, what they're gonna ask themselves is, okay, are you going to keep this spot or is Caden Lindstrom gonna take your spot? Because you look at Columbus in a long-term aspect, like this is there's a lot of young players both on this team and in the system. And Cole Sillinger, much like Matty Beniers, was a guy that had a rookie year that made him look like he was going to be the staple top six forward on his team. Like he out of pretty much nowhere had 31 points in 79 games and you know, tough sophomore year. He got back to 32 points last year, but he wasn't as good. Like just calling a spade a spade. He was not as good last season as his rookie year. He just much like Matty Beniers, actually, I just call him a little bit unengaged too many times that I watched him last year. Um, but Columbus has obviously seen enough in him to say, here's just under $5 million. You have 2 years. Show us that we need you around, right? And somebody like Kent Johnson, who's playing left wing right now, who can play center. You've got Fantilli, you've got Lindstrom, you've got Monahan already there. So he's got to show that with that group of young players, he's at that level. Will he? Who knows? Honestly, I don't know what you think. This is hard to predict for me. Like if this is going to be a hit or a miss.
I want to see him on line this year with Boone Jenner and either Kirill Marchenko or Voronkov. I think a goal scorer and a talented grit guy who has a knack for getting the puck to the net. I think if he can make himself a two-way forward slash playmaker between two guys like that, he can show him that he has a lot of value to his team and to any team that wants him in the future. Because you can't get enough guys who can play multiple roles up front. And if you can excel at both ends of the ice and you can be a great playmaker for different styles of players, you're going to have suitors for the rest of your career, for sure. But I think that's all we have on Cole Sillinger. One other thing that happened immediately after we finished recording our last pod, Austin Matthews named captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, taking over from John Tavares. I think a lot of people saw this coming. I mean, as Tavares' role has reduced with the team, showing signs of his age a bit. He did have that one crazy drive to the net in playoffs that like completely turned back the clock for all of about 20 minutes. That was a lot of fun. But Tavares isn't exactly the player he used to be, and I mean, after all the first and I guess one second round exit, it's time to turn the page a bit. I want you to think back to it is a different situation, but what it reminds me of is when Dustin Brown's captaincy was passed to Kopitar. That's what I'm reminded of. Originally, I was thinking Thornton to Pavelski, but it reminds me more of the Brown to Kopitar one. Um, I I really like what's being done. I don't really think it's going to change how Matthews is with media or his teammates. I think he is Austin Matthews and he's going to continue to be Austin Matthews. And the cool thing too is they they made no small potatoes out of how grateful they were to Tavares for having been captain for this time so far. Like he still has a role at the team. He's probably still going to wear an A, and he is still going to be an important person in that locker room and with the media. Like he's not going anywhere, not yet at least. So I like how the process was done. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think well, I think I think there's two versions of this story. One of them is news and one of them isn't. And we got the version that really isn't news because John Tavares was apparently very involved in the decision and very,
Mhm.
like very on board and very supportive and whatnot. If Tavares gets stripped and he's not a fan, I totally think this terrible, like, how could they do this to the guy that came home and has those pajamas probably somewhere still in a frame or something. Um,
Okay, I knew you were gonna bring up pajamas. I
um,
knew you were. All right, just a subtle reminder, everyone. Aiden loves making fun of the Leafs, and he has at least 100 Leafs memes sent in the past year.
easily, but but Tavares, like, and all that is to say, like, I don't think this is news. This is like, th- this was always going to happen either this year or next year. It was one of the two. The fact it happened this year was because Tavares is like, oh yeah, let's do it now. It'll help. But it was one or the other. Like, it's really, yeah, it's. I'm glad he was involved. I would have thought it was very harsh, and he would have been very hard done by to be told, hey, your last season here or the last season on this contract, we're going to take away your captaincy and give it to this much younger, much less experienced player.
Definitely. One more piece of NHL news came out today while I was out at work. Although I already knew about it a few days ago because it got leaked. Nice work, EA. The Hughes brothers, Jack, Quinn, and Luke will be on the cover of NHL 25. That's three players on one cover. I've seen two. I've seen odd covers before. Um, Three feels like a crowd, but it fits. It makes sense to me. I love the theme, and these are all fun players that people are massive fans of throughout the NHL. Um, it kind of begs the question, Aiden, do you prefer one big player on the cover as a showcase, or do you want a theme with multiple players? What do you think?
Honestly, James, I'd say it was 2021, and it wasn't because it was Matthews, but 2021 it was Matthews's second cover in 3 years. Oh, and it was NHL 22. I think. Actually, I don't know. Was Matthews NHL 19, NHL 21, or was he NHL 20, NHL 22? I don't remember. Either way, Matthews had it twice in 3 seasons, and that kind of just took all the investment out of it for me because, like, I as much as I'm a hockey fan, I'm a soccer fan too. And FIFA forever, it was always just Messi or just Ronaldo, and so it wasn't like a big deal. So the second it was somebody twice in 3 years, I just haven't really cared since then, to be quite honest with you. Like, that
Yeah,
just,
Matthews was 20 and 22.
yeah, that just took me out of it completely. I thought Sarah Nurse was kind of a cool touch.
Zegras and Nurse together.
Yeah, see, that made no sense to me. I think, well, it's not necessarily that it made no sense to me. I didn't like how, like, if you're gonna put a player in an international jersey, put the other player in an international jersey too. Like, I
Totally.
I thought that was so freaking weird that Zegras was sitting there in a Ducks jersey beside Nurse in a Canada jersey. But yeah, so that's a long-winded, very that's a long-winded way of me saying I care in a way that makes it seem like, or me saying I don't care. Obviously, like, it's part of hockey, but it's part of the brand. It's part of, like, everybody plays NHL, right? Like, every hockey fan, whether or not they own a game console. I played NHL long before I was like playing video games on my own anyways, right? Like, I knew what it was, right? Like, I played it at friends' houses before I owned it. Like, um so it's relevant in that sense, but again, I kind of compare, the changes and the fact that they're going back to different wells like they did with Matthews, or like they are with these multiple player things, as kind of like a trend towards a game like FIFA, where it's like, it's just going to be a guy. It might be the same guy, who knows. EA's not thinking about it too hard. Like,
Well, you still haven't answered the question. One player or multiple players? What do
uh,
you prefer?
I I think I liked it better as one guy. Yeah, I think I'd like it better as one guy.
I also want them, just building on this, I want them to go back to unveiling it at the NHL awards. Like it was an award to be put on the cover. I remember the Marty Brodeur one where they're like, and the PK Subban one, where it was a thing that you were like, this exciting NHL player, and it's practically an award. And it would be like down to a few players at the end. I thought that was awesome. I hope that's something they consider going back to. I think that's all we have for NHL news, but I think Aiden wanted to give us a little reminder about junior hockey. Take it away, my friend.
Oh, I mean, it's the same thing we say. I think I say this twice a year, and this is now what is this? We're entering season 3 of the podcast. Which is funny, but
That's wild. It doesn't
yeah,
seem like it.
yeah, I say this at least during the start and during the playoffs every year, and that's listen, no matter where you live, and maybe I should put an asterisk on that. There's a chance that you live somewhere where there's no hockey, but chances are that if you live in Canada and you're listening to this podcast, within 20 minutes of you, there's a junior hockey team, and there's a chance that you live somewhere where in 10 minutes you can get to a junior B team, in 20 you can get to a junior A team, and in 40 you can get to a major junior team or less, right? That could totally describe your situation. And it could be even closer to you to go watch a pro team play. But this hockey thing and everything you see in hockey, it comes from the bottom, and it only works if there's the infrastructure in place for young players, but it goes so much further than players. It can be coaches, it can be media like James and I, it can be management, it can be scouts, anybody. If somebody's starting out in hockey, whether they're a player or not, chances are they pass through the junior ranks in some capacity. So just a reminder that no matter when your local junior team's home games are, go out, check it out. It's going to be at least a good atmosphere and probably some good hockey, especially if you live in like I'm totally a big fan in British Columbia right now. Like, we've talked a lot about the BCHL. There's going to be a lot more to talk about in terms of the Western Canada junior hockey landscape in the next little while as, some more decisions are made around how everything's going to go. We've got a kind of a new development model in place from Hockey Canada. But all that's only possible with community support. Everybody you see in hockey, everybody, chances are, in some way or another, whether it's been through employment, whether it's been through community relations, whether it's been anything, they've had their lives either touched or helped by junior hockey. So just a reminder to everybody as you're watching the NHL teams get back into swing, junior hockey teams get started even earlier. So if you got an itch for hockey, September, junior seasons start before the NHL seasons do. Go watch some hockey in September. I know I'm calling my first game in less than a month now.
And I'm just going to build on that here because say you are local, you've got some family, you might have some cousins, you might have little siblings, something along those lines. Maybe you even have kids. None of my friends have kids yet, but maybe you do. Um, Bring those little cousins, those nieces or nephews, those kids to go with you to go see these hockey games. It's an affordable, fun family activity, and just maybe you'll end up having a similar experience to my uncle and his kids. He got them into hockey this year in Port Alberni, and he started taking them to Alberni Valley Bulldogs games. Now the Bulldogs have been very good in the last couple years, going to the BCHL final in 23, no, in 22-23, and being eliminated in the BCHL conference finals this year by the Surrey Eagles. So that's a decent amount of playoffs and a lot of fun, a lot of high stakes games. So, my uncle's kids are 7 and 9 years old during the season. One of them was 6. Um, Bulldogs goalie Callum Tongue had a notably amazing playoff. The kid was out of this world. I believe he received an NHL camp invite. Just while I'm telling the story, Aiden, do you mind checking that one, seeing whose camp he ended up at? Um, but yeah, so Tongue has an amazing game. I believe he's named first star. He made a save that was shared like crazy online. I believe the NHL page even ended up sharing it. It was just absolute wildness. I think Spit and Chicklets might even have shared the save. It was just ridiculous. And so he gets named first star of the game. My little cousin Fisher, all of 6 years old at the time, obsessed with hockey, collecting hockey cards, watching hockey, going on hockey YouTube, playing hockey. He's like Bam Bam from Flintstones on skates with his excitement. He doesn't want to learn how to stop because it's so fun to run into the boards after you shoot the puck. He loves it. So he's banging on the glass, cheering, and Callum Tongue puts his stick over and gives it to him. His game stick from being named first star in the best game this 6-year-old has ever watched. That's a core memory. Bring the kids, get them into the sport. They'll love it. I recommend it. And if you don't have kids, recommend it to people you know with kids. Just do it. We all get into hockey in different ways. This is from the ground up.
Yeah, he's University of Connecticut bound, but Calgary and Florida both invited him to their camps. And that could happen, in a variety of situations. They might have been looking at him to draft him, right? And decided that, well, he's 20 years old. Chances are that he'll be available as a free agent eventually. So we're just gonna hold off and wait. But yeah, like James said, there's always these guys locally, and they might turn into NHLers, they might turn into professionals, but either way, chances are they're going to make an impact on your local team and maybe your local community as well. So get out there and support.
Definitely. Well, moving on, one last piece of hockey stuff to talk about. Instead of trivia, I am going to present a mock trade scenario to Aiden, and he's gonna have to make up a trade. Yaroslav Askarov of the Nashville Predators has, I believe, requested a trade, and there's been some speculation about whether or not he would report to camp if he's not given an NHL role. Because, I mean, UC Saros was given a massive contract extension. Maybe Askarov doesn't see a future with the organization. So he is pulling a couple different cards and maybe seeing what else his options are. He might not have a ton of leverage, but maybe he does. Aiden, I would like you to give me one mock trade for a place you'd like to see him go, and another mock trade for something that just makes sense and feels like it would work.
Okay. Well, and you know what? I'll give you two. And like I don't want to see him in Toronto, I guess, because I think he's really good. And so I guess if I guess this will be the logical one. Mitch Marner. Like Nashville just signed Stamkos and Marcia, so like they're clearly pushing. Why not add another superstar? Like the way they're acting is so win now, right? And I don't think they're close enough for that, but why not, right? Like how often is a guy as good as Marner available on the trade market? And if you're a team like Toronto, it seems to me like they're just trying to move him out, right? Like we're not into like Patrick Laine territory or anything with Marner right now. But that $10.9 million cap hit can't be swallowed by anybody. And I'm not saying Nashville can, but I'm saying that if Toronto were getting a Askarov out of this deal, maybe it's a Askarov plus making the money work for Marner, right? From Nashville's point of view. And, like you kind of just dropped this on me. So I don't know too much about the money. I don't have the financials in front of me. Um, but that's kind of the first one that comes to my mind in terms of, like at the end of the day, Stamkos, Marchessault, and Tommy Novak's a cool second line if you use Stamkos as a winger. But wouldn't it be nice if you could go like a Forsberg, O'Reilly, Stamkos, or Marchessault, and then play Marner with Stamkos and Novak on the second line or something, right? Like it's nice. And not to mention, if Nashville can retain Marner, I really like the idea of Mitch Marner and Joakim Kemell playing on a line together. I think that is like almost as good as it gets in terms of a winger pair and in terms of two wingers that you have the playmaker and you have the pure sniper. That's kind of how a winger pair should be.
So Aiden, maybe like to make the money work, it would be like roster player who is making decent money plus Nyquist plus B-level prospect plus a Askarov for Marner.
Kind of something like that, yeah, because you'd you'd be paying, and I don't know about four pieces. You might go slightly better prospect, and then in return, because realistically, Toronto, Mitch Marner's contract, remind me, I'm pretty sure this is the last year, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Toronto's retention, and as much as maybe, like You're getting Yaroslav Askarov, who I believe, James, is he still in an ELC? I believe he is. But regardless, if he's not on an ELC, he's at a very low cap hit. So what you could do to make the money work is take back a roster player like Nyquist that you can use in your top six or something, and then just have Toronto retain the salary until it gets there. Because I know teams are super unwilling to retain salary, but if it's on 1 year, like it's not a big deal. It's one season and then it
And
goes away
and if they
forever.
retain, they're getting more prospects.
Yes, yeah, they would get more in return. Um,
Maybe it's Phil Tomasino.
the one I want to see happen, I would say a scare off to Montreal for Mike Matheson and Christian Dvorak.
Okay. How do you
Yeah.
make the money work? What's your mock trade?
How do I make the money work? A scare off to Montreal for Matheson and Dvorak.
So you got like
Um,
9 million to fit in Nashville now.
yeah, and again, that's that's tough. And Matheson's got 2 years left at 4.8. So I wonder if there's retention happening in one of them. I doubt it's both from Montreal.
Yeah.
Um, if it's gonna happen in one of them, I would put my money that it's Dvorak because he's only got 1 year left. Um, so it would be, I would say, half retention on Dvorak, and then it would be probably a Gus Nyquist going back the other way again, and then you'd have Dvorak kind of fill in the top nine forward spot that is now, taken away. And not to mention that this top six I'm working with in my head for Nashville is Forsberg, O'Reilly, Stamkos, Nyquist, Novak, and Marcia. So Luca Evangelista and Phil Tomasino can fill those spots, right?
Yep.
So realistically, if Nashville end up, like a Christian Dvorak, like is he a top six forward? No, I don't think Christian Dvorak's a top six forward. But
Stick on your third line though.
yeah. So if you're moving Nyquist out, it doesn't have to be Dvorak going in. It can be Tomasino
Yeah.
going into the top six, and then you add Matheson on the back end as well. Which I don't hate Nashville's defense, but I definitely think there's room for improvement because outside
It
of
needs some love.
yeah, Shea and Yossi are their guys, and then they have a bunch of guys I think I'd really like on my bottom pair, but there's four of them. So
I like Carrier as a number 4.
yeah, I don't mind it. I would have taken it if I was Vancouver over Myers or Desharnais if he was available. If you look at
Yeah, like
Vancouver's right
Carrier and
side,
Brady Shea. That's a sick pair.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, yeah. You just need a right shot guy for Yossi, which isn't Matheson, mind you. But I know Shea. Like I wouldn't actually hate Shea and Yossi together. I think that works.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Matheson can play the right side.
He has I know he did in Florida. He hasn't in Montreal, but he did pretty
Right.
much his entire career in Florida because he was
Right.
really solid and he was okay in Florida, and then he wasn't good in Florida, and then he wasn't good in Pittsburgh, and then
And then
all
he
of a
was sick
sudden,
in
yeah,
Pittsburgh at the end.
yeah, and then all of a sudden he played really well in Pittsburgh, and he has played well in Montreal. So, he's kind of like Alex DeBrincat, where you don't know if you're going to get 40 goal like sniper, always dangerous Alex DeBrincat, or goal every 4 games. Only notice him on the power play, Alex DeBrincat.
Right.
So it's yeah, but I think Montreal and Toronto, honestly, like it makes sense that those are two main destinations as far as teams who have defense and forwards, or at least in Toronto's case, forwards assets to offer Nashville that they'd be interested in and need a young goalie or could benefit from a young goalie. I don't think it's Nedeljkovic. I don't think he's the answer in Montreal. Jacob Fowler, maybe, but he's farther out.
Well, Aiden, let's close things off on the hockey part. And then let's close off this podcast with one more thing. It's movie time. And did I ever watch a good movie this week? And you were right here for it. You were sitting here at my place watching me watch The Departed for the first time. I remember looking at you going, wait, you're missing it. And he's like, I'm not even watching this. I'm watching you watch this.
Yeah.
And dude, it was everything it always lived up to be. There's a lot of great movies that I haven't watched because I'm waiting for the perfect scenario for them. And we had a great scenario for it. We went and got a bunch of snacks at Duffin's Donuts and Lucky's Bodega. It was everything we could have possibly needed. The heat had kind of died down a bit. We didn't even need to have my air conditioner on anymore. We had already watched a worse movie, And so we kind of got like that part out of our system. And man, everyone's performance in The Departed, everyone from Alec Baldwin to Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Leo, dude, everyone was perfect. And no, it didn't feel like anyone stepped over each other. Mark Wahlberg, who is usually a leading character in his movies, he had like what, 10 scenes? Like 10 full sequences that he was in, maybe.
And he made
If
a huge impact in the scenes.
huge,
Yeah, yeah.
huge. And I think he had two of my favorite scenes in the movie. Like the scene in The Departed where Leo's in the office with Wahlberg and Martin Sheen, and they are going at him, and then he ends up being an undercover cop, like that they send off. That was one of the cooler scenes I've watched in a long time because I love watching Mark Wahlberg flip the switch from calm to funny to freaking the hell out, but in a way that isn't over the top and doesn't undermine the quality of the performance. Because a lot of the time it's like, oh, Wahlberg, oh, he's just yelling. Oh, he's just yelling. He's confused and yelling. No, this was perfect. This was calculated. This was an ensemble cast working the way that a symphony does, where it's all moving parts that work together to create beautiful, sweet music. I'm a big fan. Again, lived up to the hype. Very, very happy with it. Looking forward to checking more off my list. Aiden, what have you watched in the past week that you can bring to the table?
I really liked the movie American Fiction. It's about a writer who kind of realizes that a lot of the novels that he's seeing succeed and be championed are less. It's less about their content and more about a social message they're sending. And the main character
Oh,
is
Jeffrey
named
Wright. He's good.
yes, yeah. The main character is played by Jeffrey Wright. Um, and as a person of color, he kind of takes a step back and he says, there's all these stories that are supposed to be black stories that aren't authentic. It's almost like it's a misinterpretation of what a black story is supposed to be. And so um and he's at a point in his career where much of what he's written, which has been well thought out and truly very coherent and good pieces of fiction, haven't succeeded. And as kind of as a joke, he writes this story that is all the worst parts of the exploitation of a minority for the gain of profiting. And he is a minority writing this story, but he doesn't draw from his own experiences. He just makes it full of stereotypes and way over the top. And then it's so the movie's about the book he ends up writing and how that's received, and the character himself, played by Jeffrey Wright, named Monk Allison, and his story and his family's story told as this part of his career is happening. And it's not perfect. Like it definitely feels at times like you are watching two different movies. Like it feels a little bit like a TV show sometimes, in that like the two separate things that are happening feels very A plot, B plot, which I don't love in a movie, but it's linked together enough that it feels like a whole story, which I liked. And every performance is really good, all of them. Like I didn't really feel like anybody wasn't keeping up. Like it was just well acted all the way through. It was well written. I liked it a lot.
I love Jeffrey Wright in the supporting role as Felix in Daniel Craig's Bond movies. So I'm sure I'd love this movie and I'll add it to the list. So I think that's all we've got for this week's episode. And man, I don't know at this rate. Next week could be packed with news too. If everybody's moving and shaking and getting their rosters and organizations ready for the year, we might have more fun. We might have more news before camp starts. So buckle up, anticipate fun, hope for the best. And I mean, if I could leave you guys with one thing, you probably got about a dozen nice days between now and the end of September. Take advantage of them, get outside because If you're like me and you live on the West Coast, it's going to be gray and wet soon. You don't want to go into that with any regrets about whether or not you enjoyed your summer. So get out there, have fun, go for that one last swim before the water's cold. And Aiden, unless you have anything else, without further ado, let's roll that outro. Thanks, guys.